The experiment at the facility had gone horribly wrong. Humanity was never supposed to mess with things they said was on the other side. What was meant to be a device used for traveling into other dimensions or planes of existence became the greatest weapon we created against ourselves. I put the blame on the lab coats, as I like to call the workers responsible for its design. Before I begin, I want to add a little something. My name is John Doe, since I won't be using my actual name. I come from a small town I assume you're not aware of. I was just a mere logistics and janitorial worker at a top secret scientific facility dedicated to discovering life outside of our universe. However, this wasn't just it. The programs they had here focused on the possibility that there does exist life on the other side, or the afterlife to be more specific. Scientists have developed technology capable of spotting things that we would write off as fictional mumbo-jumbo. Things like ghosts, demons, angels, werewolves, wendigos, you name it. I don't want to go into too much details on what they found, so I'll give you some basics. One form of technology they created was a camera with lens designed for spotting things that aren't visible to the naked eye. All the while, they developed a radio tower, or big dish as I like to call it, that was capable of transmitting and receiving signals at nearly infinite speeds. I don't know how they did this, and it sounded too ridiculous, but that was what I heard from some lab coats when I was simply cleaning the floors. If anything, I didn't mind listening in on their findings and accomplishments, but I wish they'd learn to fucking clean up after themselves to make my job a little easier. I assume they do that on purpose, just to fuck with me sometimes. But it still beats my last workplace where coworkers constantly create drama or gossip about others, especially me. Not to mention the pay was stable. I can't leave anyway, since my job is a contract job, and I'm required to work there for 2 years until I am let go and my contract is complete. But I was happy of the fact that I was receiving hourly pay, as well as $10,000 upon completion of contract, so yeah. Right now, I'm currently not working there anymore. The facility had shut down over a month ago. All the staff, including myself, were let go following the incident. I wouldn't go back there, and we were forced to leave the town. Yes, the entire town was heavily affected by this. God rest the souls of those who perished during the incident or didn't make it out of there. So, where do I start? During a particular day where I was performing logistics work when the delivery trucks for supplies came in, as usual, I would check everything that comes in and see if there are any discrepancies or damages to the delivered items. Thankfully, they were all okay, but as I was about to start putting them away along with a few other colleagues, John Doe, someone said, calling my name. I turned to see who it was, and I was surprised. I didn't think a high-ranked military official would get involved in the program. Maybe the military took interest in battling forces from other dimensions, but that would be a dumb idea. Perhaps there was more to it than that. Standing next to the official was a man I knew by his alias, Ace. Why, he's considered the ace of cards when it comes to doing the work here. He was a brilliant mind to have around, one that would put Einstein to shame. Ace then gave a formal introduction. I won't mention the general's real name, so I'll refer to him as Blackjack. John Doe, this is General Blackjack. He's going to be joining us in our latest experiment. He, as well as other personnel, will assist us in monitoring for any activity regarding said experiment. Ace said, "Really? What experiment is that?" I asked. "We call it Project Stargate." That was an interesting name for the device. The technology of the device was our greatest and most prized human accomplishment, and what also led to our greatest downfall in scientific achievement. I say this because it was through this device that a horrifying situation occurred. Nevertheless, I asked to see why he wanted to introduce me, and that's when I got my answer. "You will be joining us, John. We could use your support for the logistics part of it," he said. That didn't make much sense at first, until he gave me a list of the specific items and the amounts the experiment needs. Some of them involved strange codes as I could describe them, but these things didn't have names of the items. I'm used to seeing names and simple numbers to read, but when I'm met with complex codes or stuff like this, I would be confused. "What are these codes or symbols or whatever these are?" I asked Ace. "Simple. Just put them in where you would normally put information you use to order products to our facility, and the items associated with them will appear on the order screen, automatically ready to be ordered by you. That's all you need to know. No more questions," he said. "Very well," I said, confused and irritated of the fact I wasn't being let in on what they're planning. anything. When I got to the computer and popped up the website we used to order the items, I did as I was told. When I did, I was hit with a wave of confusion. Upon doing this, the item that came showed a series of more complex codes, and to the right of it says encrypted. I assume that whatever these were, the folks here don't want anyone to know what they specifically are, not even me. I don't blame them. It's hard to trust myself, given that I'm sharing this despite having signed a non-disclosure agreement. If anything, even I had no clue where the facility was, since I never knew the town close by it. I was from a different state after all. That aside, I simply ordered the items and gave the confirmation to Ace. He thanked me for my work. What caught my attention was that the items arrived on the next day. Normally I expected items to be arriving within 3 to 5 days, so I'm guessing wherever I ordered the unknown items from must be from a place that has top-notch delivery speed. However, that wasn't the strangest part. Not that high-speed delivery was strange, but I didn't expect the items to arrive in just 14 hours. When I checked the boxes, they all shared the same codes I saw on the computer. When I opened the boxes to see and check for items, I was astonished. There were 4 glass items resembling plasma balls you could find in certain stores, and they were held in cylindrical containers. What made it more intriguing was seeing the containers had a lid that can be opened. When I opened one, the ball began to charge as best as I could describe, as what looked like lightning started appearing in the ball. As I touched it, I was shocked at first, no pun intended. However, I wasn't electrocuted. It just felt weird. I didn't know how long I was caught up with the sensation. It's amazing, isn't it? I heard Ace say, causing me to jump in fright and turn towards him. He gave a laugh at my reaction, and I looked down in shame for that. Interesting piece of technology. When it charges like this, it's because it reacts to the bioelectricity you give off, as well as anything capable of producing electricity within it. Quite fascinating and strange, yes, he said. Where did it come from? I asked. Let's just say a top secret government facility in another country. They've been developing these things. Humanity is continuing their greatest achievements, even in secret. He told me. I looked at the other boxes that came in. Another one had guns that looked like a mix between an AK-47 and an M4. Upon closer inspection, there appeared to be some kind of glowing light on the top of the frame. The guns seemed strange too. I picked one up, and I was amazed at how light they were. That's when Ace took out a gun and pointed it at the direction of an empty glass cup. Be careful where you point that. One shot from it and it hits a person, that person's body will be all over the place, he said before firing it at the glass cup, causing it along with the table to explode into pieces. But what came out of the gun was not a bullet, but a beam of light that looked like something out of Star Wars. Damn, that's fucking dangerous. Why doesn't the military have this tech? I asked. The guns that you see here are durable and well built. They can withstand tremendous amounts of damage to it. If the enemy got his hands on this weapon, who knows what trouble they could cause for us, he said. That was at least understandable, although I got curious on the general himself. What about Blackjack and his fellow personnel? I asked. There's a reason he was picked along with several others. They're more than capable of dealing with things the average human mind wouldn't be able to understand or comprehend. Not to mention they are highly trained not only in mental capacity, but physical capacity too. Of course, they'll be provided suits for the job, since we're not gonna see them sent in there with only bare skin and uniforms, he explained. But what do you mean by understanding or comprehending? I asked. Put it this way, imagine a 9 feet tall entity with 4 arms and 4 legs, humanoid in appearance, with a face similar to the horror figure Laughing Jack, but without hair. Would you handle meeting that? He asked. I took this as a silly question. Fuck no, I would kill the damn thing or run away, I yelled. Of course, you would. Even if I were to tell you that those creatures do exist, but aren't hostile to us, regardless of their so-called scary looks, you would still see them as a threat, yes? Well, no, because I now know they're friendly, I said. Yes, because you just found out. He said. Still, this didn't properly answer my question until he explained more. Sometimes in certain cases, you'll come across hideous-looking entities that actually turn out to be friendly to us, while beautiful-looking entities that actually turn out to be hostile to us. Of course, it's not always the case, but don't be quick to judge something you don't understand. Now you see what I'm saying? He asked me. I nodded, still a little confused, but slowly understanding the point he was trying to make, but confusing nonetheless. As for for the remaining boxes, one had a larger glass ball in its own container, while the others had the suits the military personnel were going to wear. The gear looked pretty high-tech and flexible, not to mention lightweight and felt hard as iron. There were also oxygen masks and tanks with some kind of technology that allows oxygen to be recycled and reused from CO2 emissions so that the personnel never run out of oxygen to breathe. As for how it works, I have no idea, and I still don't even to this day. Since the items we need to begin the experiment is here, let's get going, he said, signaling me to come and join them, which made me confused. Why me? I asked. Like I said, you'll be joining us. Grab one of those guns. You'll need it, he said. But I'm not fit for wielding a weapon. I'm not even a soldier, I said, trying to make sense of this. You are now, John. Besides, you'll be fascinated with this experiment. Come on, he explained. Still, it didn't seem like the kind of thing I should be involved in, since as I said, I'm merely janitorial and logistics. I didn't expect to be a soldier for a day, so this was new. Still, even I was interested to see what's going to happen, one that I regret dearly after what I saw. When I followed Ace, he led me into a room that I've been in before. However, last I remember, there wasn't a massive, circular-shaped object inside it. I'm guessing they just brought it in. The device itself looked like some kind of portal device you would see in the Stargate series. Now I'm assuming this is why they call it Project Stargate. It somewhat resembles that machine too. What makes this device unique is this device had 5 empty slots, 2 small ones on each side, and a big one at the top. It's clear these slots are where those glass balls are going on. This is it, John. This is Project Stargate. It's going to be ready soon in an hour. When that does, we will be prepared to witness humanity's greatest invention come to life. We'll be able to learn more and perhaps communicate with beings from different dimensions, provided they're not hostile, Ace told me. I admit, I was surprised to see the device myself. It was big, probably about 20 feet in length and width. You and the rest of your colleagues bring the supplies here. We'll get the military suited up and the device ready, Ace explained. So I went back to the supply room to get the stuff. I admit, I was feeling nervous about this, mostly because of my fear of the unknown. We don't know what we would meet with or encounter on the other side of the portal. If it really is meant to open portals to dimensions or other planes of existence, I wouldn't like the idea of inviting extraterrestrials or demonic spirits in our world. Nevertheless, I continued to participate as I let my curiosity get the better of me. After an hour had passed and the supplies were brought in, everything was in its place. The orbs were set in the slots, the military suited up, and everyone along with the military, including myself, were all equipped with weapons. The reason for this is because in case the military doesn't make it back from whatever world they're sent to cross over to, and the inhabitants cross into the portal and are a threat to us, we're specifically told to protect this facility, soldier or not. So, even the lab coats were armed. Once everyone was prepared, I heard one of the scientists giving specific details on the function of the device. Everything is currently going well, getting frequency readings. No malfunctions so far, Ace, he said. That's when I noticed Ace giving a big smile at this, as he was expecting the device to function well. No issues reported. Good. Activate the device, he said. That's when I watched the scientist move his hands as if he was pressing buttons, and then he grabbed onto what looked like a small lever before pulling it down. Once he did, I turned to look at the portal. It gave off a strange noise which sounded like a mix between whistling and electronic whirring. Then I noticed the glass orbs light up, meaning they were in contact with the electricity flowing throughout or around the device. I couldn't tell. Then the big orb at the center top lit up, and after a few moments of waiting, I noticed a scene manifest in the center of the device. The military personnel lined up in front of the device, preparing to cross over into it. When I looked at the scenery in front, I was amazed. The place seemed quite beautiful. I noticed what I assumed to be birds in the distance, flying around in that beautiful, purple sky. There even appeared to be a huge mountain in the distance. One of the birds probably saw the portal because it started flying towards us, but when it got close enough, I realized they weren't birds. They were dragons. This dragon looked a lot like the one in the movie Reign of Fire. Then, it gave a very loud screech. Turn it off. Turn it off, Ace yelled as one of the dragons spat fire at the personnel. Before the portal was shut off, the dragon's fire came in contact with the suits of the personnel. Apparently, those suits could withstand the heat of that fire, and thankfully, no one was injured. However, everyone cheered on about this moment. Why all the cheering? That dragon could have burned us all. It even flew towards us. I said loudly, "That's a good sign too, John. That means our portal was a success. We just made contact," Ace said in a fit of joy and excitement. Of course, the fact that the dragon's fire touched the suits means that the portal wasn't showing just a simple scene, but it was also a gateway into another world. I was at least thankful the dragon didn't cross through the portal, else it would be here with us and wreaking havoc in the facility, and we'd probably all be dead. Unfortunately, Ace's ambition got the best of him as he asked to turn the portal back on. When it was back on, the scientists scanned for other worlds or dimensions to access. This one seems to operate in a different vibratory frequency, the scientists claimed. Apparently, this was a dimension beyond that of our physical universe. Looking at it, the realm looked like it was made of pure energetic light. Then I noticed the inhabitants. They resembled humanoid beings with etheric bodies. Thankfully, none of the entities gave a threatening gesture since they looked into our direction. "Should we go through?" General Blackjack asked. "This world is etheric in nature. There's a pretty good chance you'll leave your bodies, therefore die if you all cross into it. So to be safe, it's best if you stay put," Ace told them. I'm not surprised with Ace's expertise on etheric energies, given that he's worked in this facility dedicated to finding such things in the existence. Still, the realm looked beautiful and interesting. It seemed to be a realm surrounded in an empty void, yet it was inhabited by beings made of pure light. "Proceed to scan for more worlds," Ace said. "I was bummed out when we lost sight of that plane. I can only wish to join those inhabitants after I die, even though that sounds ridiculous." Once the next scan finished, we noticed a new world that was strange. This world looked like ours, but it was black and white in color. It was like staring at an old vintage movie back in the 1930s. Strangest of all was seeing the inhabitants in the distance. "Are we able to cross into it?" General Blackjack asked. Unlike the previous one, scans showed this one as stable, so yes, the scientist claimed. Once he got the approval, he and the military walked through the portal and began walking on that world. That's when I saw the inhabitants looking directly at them. I jumped slightly in shock when I noticed one of those inhabitants appear quickly in front of the portal from the side. It reached its arm out in an attempt to touch the portal, only that its hand went through. From what I observed even at a distance, this thing resembled Slenderman given its features. The only exception was the height, that being 4 to 5 feet as I could describe. It also had fingers with long, black nails. It seemed completely naked, but at least the thing didn't have any genitalia. After observing us through the portal, it turned towards the personnel who were visibly watching it, and then walked towards them. I assumed that this thing was going to attack the general and everyone in their world. But that didn't happen. Instead, it just stared at them for a few moments before it turned away and took off running, as if it had seen the boogeyman. The other figures in the distance did the same thing. Choosing not to interact with the personnel, General Blackjack, "Can you still hear us?" Ace asked through the speaker. "Yes, we can, thank goodness. Luckily there was still sound to be heard from you, else I wouldn't be talking to you right now," General Blackjack claimed. "The guys who made those suits are geniuses. The communications system in your suit can still keep in connection with us despite being in the new world. Now come back in," Ace said with a smile. The general and all the personnel came back. Their suits were checked for any substances from that world, but there was nothing. "Let's do one final look into another world before we cease our experiment," Ace claimed. If there was one more thing I could give credit to Ace for, he was spot on when he said this was our final look. This is because it was at this moment that things turned grim. When the scientists began a scan and found a new world, we were met with a hazy, smoky scene. For some reason, we couldn't see anything, but that wasn't the worrying part. What followed next was a series of loud, screeching sounds, followed by guttural roars and howling noises that I've never heard in all my years. I grew up in a small town where I would hear wolves howling at certain times of the night. This howling sound was new, let alone extremely awful. All these sounds from it made my skin crawl with pure terror. I don't like that noise. I'll find another world. the scientist anxiously stated before beginning a new scan. I was thankful that the noises were gone. We found another world which probably wouldn't be any better if the device stayed on it. There appeared to be skyscrapers, and the entire city seemed as though we were staring into the future or perhaps an alien civilization. However, this lasted for only several moments, because after that, this is where the horror began. The world disappeared, and after hearing what the scientist said next, a cold grip of terror got me. The device, something must be controlling it. It's taking us back to the previous world we just left. Everyone in the facility, even I myself, became anxious and horrified. I assumed that whatever was in that world must have noticed the portal we made to access its world and decided to force us back to it. When we were brought back, those horrifying sounds returned. To add to the horror, a figure walked through the portal. This thing was horrifying. It looked like an unholy mix between a werewolf and a wendigo. It had antlers on the top of its head, with long, black tusks protruding from its mouth, while the body looked fleshy and furry, and its eyes bloodshot with a yellow iris and crimson pupils. Then, it gave off a horrible, guttural howl. Other hideous creatures, different in sizes and appearances, came through the portal. A hideous, wolf-looking entity slashed at one of the soldiers, causing his suit to be ripped apart with ease. "Open fire," General Blackjack screamed. We all shot at the creatures. They were taking damages from the shots, but this didn't seem to drive them back, nor cause their bodies to explode. These things were resilient. They got angry and started lunging around, attacking anyone else nearby. "John, get the fuck out of here. We'll hold them off. The rest of you, go," Blackjack told me. I nodded and ran as fast as I could. I heard loud footsteps coming toward me, with the sound of its guttural roar telling me that one of the creatures is chasing me down. The thing stopped when I heard it screech in pain. I turned to look, and I could see Ace lying with his gun pointed at the pursuing creature's direction. "John, there's a lever at the opening to the facility. Pull it down before you leave. This will keep these things from getting out. Go now," Ace told me before the creature decided to target him for his transgression, leaving me alone. This gave me the opportunity to get away from the room as I shut the door tight and made sure it was locked, hoping it would buy me some time. I suspect these things would know how to break it down, since they are intelligent enough to cause the device to return the portal back to their world. My suspicions were confirmed when one of the small entities knocked the door down and came out. I saw it turn towards me and it gave chase. Luckily, it wasn't fast enough so I could run from it. The alarm kicked off. Warning, unidentified breach in Sector 2A. Repeat, unidentified breach in Sector 2A. When I got through the facility lobby, some of the workers started prepping to leave the facility. They saw me running, followed by the small creature that was looking at them. The workers all ran in fear. I was lucky that the creature didn't jump up to attack me because it jumped to the wall and lunged at one of the workers. Poor guy wasn't quick enough to get away as that thing kept mauling him alive. I couldn't stay to help him, so I kept running. When I finally got to the exit, another creature came bursting through the lobby. It was that hideous wolf-like entity. It had its eyes locked onto me. Luckily, I was in reach of the lever, so I grabbed onto it and pulled it down. Sadly, a few other scientists that were in the lobby couldn't make it out in time. I saw the facility's large emergency door, which looked like a metal hangar door, slide from right to left at a very fast pace. I was able to jump out, with the emergency door missing my feet by a few inches. Myself, along with 2 logistics colleagues and 3 lab coats, were the only ones who made it out. I felt sorry for those who didn't make it. Godspeed to those who might still be alive down there. After a couple of days, we were notified by our local news of a mass outbreak of some unknown virus from that facility, and nearby residents along with myself were ordered to evacuate immediately. Now, that place is nothing more than a ghost town. There's no one living there. As for me, I'm currently in a city I'm not going to disclose. I don't want anyone coming to my door and talking to me about this. I'd rather just post it on some random website than do a debriefing or interview. I was also told that I was released from duty, and the organization I worked for declared my contract fulfilled and deposited the $10,000 into my bank along with my paycheck. So why am I telling you this now? Well, it's because after about a month, I received a call from one of the lab coats. specifically the one that did the scans. I didn't know how he got a hold of my phone number, but I assumed someone told him or he got hold of my application records. I was surprised he was one of the 3 lab coats that made it out, but I didn't pay attention, probably because I was more worried with saving my skin than seeing his face. I asked him about the facility's condition, and luckily the entire place itself was designed and modified to be tougher than tungsten, so there's no way those things are getting out, at least I hope. I can only hope that they don't find a way out too and reach the surface of our world. When I asked what happened to the device, he told me that he had no clue, but the device gave a set of numbers on the screen that was associated with that horrifying world, indicating that the world had a specific frequency. When I asked what numbers the frequency held, I got a bone-chilling answer. He told me 666. Hi there, my NOSLEEPians. I have no idea who else to share this achievement with, given that I have no family or friends outside the cartel. Or more specifically, it's called the Stargate group. Even if I did talk about it to others, who would believe all this stuff about dimensions? Only you guys would. So, dimensions. We live in one dimension, but there are many adjacent dimensions, with different types of people that can only be accessed by portals. Got it. Next, the rundown on the drug I smuggled, called carcara. It's actually a powder made from a leaf of the rare blue carcon tree found on a dimension called Rodahara. Rodahara is a wild, forested place, save for the headquarters and operations of the various cartels. People buy the stuff for insane prices, as it enhances the mind and body to unimaginable levels for a period of time, if you're curious. So, our job is to transport it from Rodahara through a couple of dimensions like Earth to the locations the goods need to be going to. Or, at least, that's what I've heard so far. These things aren't easy to understand. Anyways, enough of that. You want to hear about my rise to power in particular, do you? After getting kicked out for being gay, being a broke 17-year-old with no accepting family, I was forced to do drug deliveries and stuff for gangs. One day, a guy messaged me, said he had a job for me. So, I met him, and there started my participation in the carcara smuggling cartel, bringing the dried leaves from one portal to the other. I didn't mind the conditions and loved that we got paid in gold, so I stayed. About 6 months later, I did something that first got the attention of my direct superiors. You see, there's a reason creatures from other dimensions don't do their own dirty work here. Compared to everywhere else, Earth is so densely populated and so unaware of other dimensions that they'll stick out like a sore thumb and be easily caught. Oh, and if the cops got onto us, that time, the cops did get onto us. We were delivering the goods when we were stopped at a police checkpoint, where they insisted on checking the truck. From where I was, at the back, I heard muffled voices of conversation. Open the back door. We need to inspect the cargo, instructed the police officer. Why? The driver, my friend Pedro, asked. I could hear the fear in his voice, and it was for a reason. If they spotted the cargo, it would be game over for all of us. They would definitely seize the unusual dried leaves, as it resembles many drugs we have on Earth. We've been tipped off about a huge shipment of drugs coming this way. Now open it. As Pedro stalled for time while getting off the truck, my coworker Dennis whispered, "What do we do now? What do you normally do?" I asked. We make a run for it. Dennis explained, to which the other guy in the back with us nodded. Fuck that, I said as they looked to me in surprise. I got a plan. That's dangerous, he whispered anxiously as I heard the squeaky sound of the door being opened. As the door cracked open, I immediately dug the conveniently located packet of itching powder out of my pocket and flicked it all over the entrance. The officer, none the wiser, stepped into the cargo hold and shined his flashlight at us in the boxes. "How many of you are in here?" he asked. "3 people in the back here, officer," I responded. "Now open one of, what the hell is this?" he asked, scratching furiously at his uncovered ankles and arms. "Sorry, officer," I nonchalantly explained. "Some of the dust from our cargo really triggers allergies." As he peered at me with annoyance, my heart was thundering in my chest despite my calm demeanor outside. I was doing some prime bullshitting there, and if he figured that out, I was fucked. As the cop stepped out and instructed his partner to avoid entering our truck, I exhaled a breath I didn't even know I was holding. That was incredibly tense, and the police would have doubled down had they actually inspected the cargo. I knew this because the old-timers had several stories of police seizing the cargo for being suspicious. Several times, I had been regaled by stories of daring missions to recapture our goods. Later, as we drove down the remote road, my coworkers lauded me. How the hell did that work even? They asked. You're a genius. They praised me the first time in my life I really heard such praise. Personally, I couldn't believe it worked, as that was a last-ditch idea I came up with on the spot. Luckily, I had the itching powder on me as I saved their asses that day. By the time we reached the Manitoban Depot, where the portal to the next dimension was located, my boss seemed to have known of my attempt to ward off the police, given that he pulled me aside. Duante, what you did today, that saved the cargo. The higher-ups were pretty impressed. Wait, that was fast. How do you know? I asked. We have cameras in the truck. We saw everything that unfolded. You're sharp as a knife, kid. You'll do well if you continue. Remember, the cartel must always flow, he said, patting my shoulder before walking into the portal to oversee the shipment on its journey to the next dimension. Little did I know it, but that was when my path upwards opened up. The grand series of events that eventually brought me here happened a few months later. This time, we were driving another shipment of leaves through a forest in Western Ontario. I was idly watching TikToks on my phone when I heard a sudden thump from under me. What the hell was that? I asked as we maneuvered the screeching truck to the side of the road next to the forest. Tire puncture, Pedro said. We gotta get off the truck and change the tire. As I hopped down from my seat, I noticed the huge nail we seemed to have driven over, so that was the beauty that impaled us. As I walked towards the back to retrieve our trusty spare tire, a teenage girl ran out of the bush and frantically waved her arms at us, startling me. Well, she was a sight to behold. Her arms and legs were covered in scratches, her clothes were torn up, and she was panting heavily. While I was still apprehensive and shocked, Pedro first approached her. What happened to you, dear? He asked. They're coming. I got Kay kidnapped and sold, and they'll take me away. Help me get home, she said between breaths. As I heard that, white-hot rage boiled in me. She had clearly been failed by the people around her. No, that was not happening to someone else. No one else would be left to suffer themselves the way I was. Just as I was about to reassure her, some creatures came bursting out of the woods on the other side of the highway. The girl let out a shriek, thinking it was her kidnappers, before realizing it was much worse. Those creatures were monstrosities of nature, things that shouldn't have existed in this place. They had perfectly triangular heads with one eye in each corner and a gaping triangular maw, along with a large ellipsoid body underneath it, and 5 hairy legs. As they made a beeline for us in the truck, I realized that they were there specifically for our carcara. Later, I would learn that these things were called the Wamas, and that the rival cartels didn't have any qualms about employing interdimensional monsters. The nerve of those little thieves. And with the most perfect timing, some men with assault rifles burst out of the bush. Where's that bitch? Find her, one of them shouted at the others in a gruff voice. As they scattered around the highway, Pedro warned me, we're only 2 people with pistols. We can't fend off everyone. I gotcha, bro, I replied before grabbing the girl's shoulders and bringing her closer. Now listen, babe, I instructed. If you want to survive, you have to follow every instruction I give you. To the letter, understand? She stared at me fearfully with her black eyes before nodding. You see those things over there? I asked, pointing to the Wamas. Go behind them. She took a few tentative, wobbly steps before looking back at me in fear. Go, I yelled. They found us. Duante, what are you doing? This is madness, Pedro yelled from the back of the truck, where he was presumably attempting to protect the cargo. I have a plan, I said as one of the men approached me. Did you see a young girl here? She ran away from home, the guy asked, glaring at me. What does she look like? I think I saw someone run that way, I said, pointing in the direction of the Wamas. Of course, they couldn't see the Wamas from that angle, so they took the bait and ran. A minute later, I heard screams and gunshots and ungodly roars coming from the Wamas. Perfect. Immediately, I moved on to the next stage of my plan by clambering up the thin ladder on the back of the truck. It was slippery and I almost lost my footing, but I eventually jumped onto the top of the lorry and unsteadily balanced myself. The view from up top was glorious as the Wamas and men fought and killed each other as the men fired desperately at the advancing Wamas, causing them to stumble and flip over like cockroaches. The Wamas spat out sharp metallic fragments that cleanly downed the 15 or so men. Behind the large llamas, the girl squatted down and hid herself out of sight. As the last man fell down, dead, the remaining 2 llamas continued shambling towards the truck. "A little help up here, Pedro?" I asked. Realizing what I was going to do, he popped out of the truck and tossed a pistol up to me. "Shoot them straight in that goddamn mouth. That's how you keep them dead," he recommended. "Oh, and I'll be changing the tire." Catching the pistol, I aimed straight at the llamas and shot it. Bang, and luckily, my shot struck true and it died immediately. I aimed my pistol straight at the mouth of the last llamas, which was poised to break into our truck, and aimed straight at it. Bang, and it died cleanly before it could take a single leaf from us. By that time, the girl ran into the truck and sat next to the driver's seat, and Pedro finished changing the wheel of the truck. As I climbed into the back, I yelled, "We're kinda behind schedule. Let's start now." As he started the truck, he commented, "That was insane. Thank goodness it worked." The next leg of the trip went rather smoothly until we stopped at a rest stop closer to our destination. There, I got off to stretch my legs and use the bathroom a bit. As I came back, I peered into the driver's section and noticed that the girl was sleeping soundly. Well, that explained the lack of any conversation. But where was Pedro? I noticed some noises in the back of the truck, so I opted to open the door. "No, don't open it." His voice rang out as I opened the door. It was too late though, for I witnessed him shoveling blue carcara powder into his mouth. We stared at each other in shock and betrayal. Now, you see, us humans can't take carcara. It's way too potent on us, and whoever takes it normally gets an extreme amount of power. In most cases, they end up destroying everything around them before eventually dying from the overload once the effects end. Essentially, it's too dangerous. He was the first to speak, insisting that he was doing all of this to provide for his family and all that. I, of course, didn't buy that nonsense, instead opting to drag him out by his collar while he pleaded with me to spare him. A few minutes later, we reached an isolated spot of grass. "Duante, please don't do this," he begged. "I really need this. I won't hurt you, I promise. If I waste even another minute, you'll become too strong to deal with. Sorry, but I must do this. Company policy is company policy, and it's for everyone's good. I'll provide for your family once you're gone." I tried to reason with him. I could already feel his grip on my sweatpants become harder and harder. As he began sobbing, I put the pistol to his temple and fired 3 times, blood splattering all over my clothes, arm, and pistol. But the deed was done and the crisis was averted. Not wanting to bring Pedro's body all the way back to the truck, I surreptitiously dumped his body in a nearby river and washed the parts of me that got blood on them. To this date, I've been supporting his family since I managed to track them down. After buying some food and water for the girl, I got into the driver's seat and drove off. While I'd only driven trucks on little side roads before, I saw how the others did it and managed to figure it out. Luckily, the girl was incredibly tired and only woke up when we were a half hour away from the destination. I would have talked to her more, but I was preoccupied with my own problems and the way I had to kill Pedro. I never wanted to end Pedro. We were great friends, in fact, but in the end I was forced to. It was his decision to mark himself for death, and there was nothing I could do. "Where's the other guy?" she asked while munching on her croissant. "Observant girl. I dropped him off earlier." I lied, seemingly satisfied by the answer. She didn't press me further. As I drove into the old warehouse, I noticed an unusually large crowd milling around the place. Unusual because, well, no one really does that for a miserly delivery of all things, and crowding isn't encouraged to begin with due to the need to stay discreet. As soon as I got off the truck, I was swarmed by the crowd, lauding me for the daring rescue of the girl and craftily fending off the llamas. In the hubbub, my boss, along with some people I hadn't seen before, squeezed her to meet me while we unloaded the goods. While some of the other workers directed the girl to her resting compartments, I was ushered away by my boss. "Good job, son. The higher-ups are impressed by how you managed to get rid of the llamas. They've been stalking us and taking our cargo for months. Now our enemies will never try anything like this again." "Llamas?" I asked. "The rival cartels sick these creatures called llamas on us just to steal the shipments. You didn't know." He responded, "No. Shouldn't we have been better armed?" I asked. "You didn't use the weapons we packed in there," he said suspiciously. "Perhaps Pedro took them." I didn't know how to respond to that, so I just said, "Thank you. So anyways, the bosses want to meet you. The people on top, those who work in Rodeara." For a moment, I simply stood there and looked at him in shock, mouth agape. "May Jigo there?" I asked in shock. Of course, you'll be going to Rodaar tomorrow. I've heard that it's quite important as well. You're being granted a position on the council. Good luck. He responded. Hearing of the council position, I quickly accepted. Curiously enough, they had dark circles of skin around their eyes, so they didn't seem to be human. Who are the other two people? I asked him. Survai. I'm Gakruth and this is Nabri. We've come to show you the way to an in Rodaara when you wish to come. One of them responded in heavily accented English. It was rather obvious that they weren't from Earth. Alright, then. Oh, and what about the girl? I asked my boss. He responded as though he had forgotten about her. What do we do with her? She knows too much about our ways. She'll have to stay with us for the time being. Now, you have to prepare for tomorrow. So, I stripped off my blood-soaked clothes, refreshed myself and slept. Awakening the next day, I swiftly ate, wore my best clothes and met Gakruth and Nabri. Gakruth pulled out a thin metal stick and wrote something on my forehead. What's that? I asked. Entered the emerald green portal to Rodaara. I expected something like the feeling of me being disassembled and reassembled in the portal, or being sucked into a spiral or something. I always wondered what it felt like every time we shoved the boxes through the portal. Instead, I felt nothing. I walked in and walked out on a whole new dimension. All that when I hadn't even traveled outside the country until I got this job. Rodaara was breathtaking. I was told that the area we were in was only the side entrance, but from there I could see the majestic red and blue forests carpeting the area, spreading as far as I could see. Behind me, sky-piercing, hauntingly beautiful mountains stretched across the landscape in long ranges. As I took in the view, Nabri led to me some sort of pack animal to ride on. It looked like some sort of flattened elephant with the hooves of a zebra and a small head that reminded me of a meerkat's. Oh, and it had two large black wings on its sides. It's a Karyuku. Here, this is what we use for transport and carrying goods, Nabri explained. I climbed on it as he instructed me to, and it trotted and flew alternatively on the well-maintained shiny white path up the hill. Around me, I saw many such animals, some with the leaves on their backs, some carrying troughs of gold and some carrying other people. I'm wondering, I started. What is it? Nabri asked. Out with it. What does Rodaara mean even? It is an archaic term for the red and blue glow of the sunrise, reflecting off the forest onto the pristine, bare white mountain cliffs. Sounded awfully specific, but okay. Eventually, we reached the hilltop and disembarked from the Karyuku. In front of me lay a huge building, reminiscent of Greek temples in its gleaming white marble and astounding arches. Here, Gakruth said proudly, the headquarters of the Stargate Inn, on top of what we call Kankamala Hill. It's majestic. I responded. That was the only thought I had on my mind, for I had never seen such beauty before. Nothing on earth could compare, quite literally. Behind me, Nabri cleared his throat. That's enough ogling, get in. We're already late. Breaking out of my reverie, I let myself be ushered through the lavish corridors into a meeting room where around 20 people already sat on a long table. It wouldn't be accurate to say people, really, for most of them were a different species. Some had light red skin, some had large horns on their heads, and a significant majority had pointed, cat-like ears. My companions bowed to them before exiting the room. A magnificent being with pale skin and pointy ears sitting at the head of the table introduced himself in a melodious voice. Greetings. I am Navraki, and these are my associates Pauraki, Tumbag, Freaked, Silris, and Dusra, gesturing at each person around him. Greetings, I am Duante. I thank you for this gift of meeting these esteemed people, I said, hoping it sounded formal enough. His only response was a thin smile. Now, we shall convene this council and discuss the reason we meet. Your talents will be required, for we will be at war. A minor stir rose among us, but died down as Navraki held up a bejeweled hand. For years, we have competed with the Kalhivam, our rivals for the uninitiated. They have many a time thwarted us, halted our plans, cut into our profits. But from today, we will take over their business. What do you plan? Asked Tumbag, his red chin moving furiously. Navraki smiled, which unsettled me. Your kinsman, Tumbag. He responded. Tumbag looked confused. Our great allies, the Gakrat. Navraki pulled up a well-illustrated, old-style map. To explain it to you simpletons, here's a map. Here, we will plunder the Kalhavim of their weapons. Using it, we will slaughter the Gakrat wholesale. The Kalhavim shall be blamed for the slaughter, and their allies shall turn their backs on them, for slaughter of all is forbidden. Then we shall destroy the Kalhavim. In one swoop, we will take control of the resources of both, and shall control the market with a majority. Now, we shall all share our advice, even the lowliest of us, he said, with a pointed glance at me. While most of them surprisingly gave non-committal answers, I dissented when my turn came. I feel it's unwise to betray our enemies like this. What if it goes wrong? We'll be done for it then. This is too much risk. You dare question me? This is madness, I yelled. You're just a human. Never forget that. Now, you will follow my orders, he said calmly as I seethed. The plan he laid out for me, essentially, was that I would sneak into the Kalhavim base through a rather conveniently located shortcut and quietly take out anyone who resisted me. Once I got in, I'd call for several Carryku to come in to do all the dirty work of carrying away their weapons. Well, real convenient. Yeah, that was my only job. But I saw how he saw me, and it reminded me of all the people back home, everyone who looked down on me. No, fuck that. I got thrown into this rather suddenly, but I was going out my own way. He rather helpfully provided me with a map and left me alone, so I cooked up my own plan as I rode down the hill. First, I went to the utilitarian-looking, rocky base of the Kalhavim group. Told them that Nevraki wished to meet the entire cartel immediately, all while pretending to tremble like a kid that lost their mommy at the store. I advised that they go to the main entrance just to achieve my goal of maximum bloodshed. Going to meet us, the little keys. They'll get a meeting. Go tell them that. The magnificently horned leader responded in an incredibly thick accent that I could barely parse. I nodded, whimpering, "Yes, my lord." Before leaving, it rankled me to give random people so much respect, no matter who they claimed to be, but I needed it for my plan to work. Next, I went to our good friends the Gakrat group. The map was easy to follow, but still I went up and down hills and mountains and tread through dense forests to reach their place. Let me tell you this, even on a Karyaku, all that movement tired the shit out of me. Oh, and everything in me hurt for days. But yeah, I had to meet them for the plan to work. Of course, I told them that the Kalhavim and Sagrikan were oh so jealous of their market clout and collaborated in a grand plan to end them. I let slip that the best way to stop them in their tracks was to go straight up to Kankamala Hill and stop this betrayal in its infancy. Oh, and I advised that those shifty little Kalhavim might start fighting the Sagrikan as well. Technically, it was half correct, wasn't it? As they assembled their magnificent, destructive war machines and called out legions of military-like henchmen, I internally rubbed my hands with glee. I had no clue how time worked in Rodaura, but if my Earth Watch and rough calculations were right, the Gakrat would come right when the other two were fighting and join in the fun. After leading them to the hill, I opted to hide in a nearby cave and nap for the night, hoping that the scattered sounds of earth-rocking explosions wouldn't awaken me too much. When I woke up, there was no more noise outside, save for the sounds of weird birds surrounding the remains of armor, weapons, and bodies of 20 different species scattered all over the hill. It seemed that the armies had fought each other and almost wholly taken each other out in the process. While I was riding my Karyaku up the hill, its frequent alternating between flying and trekking meant that my shoes were ruined from all the dirt and gore lining the hill. Well, whatever. Once again, I touched down on the hard, rocky surface of the hilltop and made my way towards the main building, which had large chunks taken out of it from the battle. Along the way, I saw the bodies of the leaders and council members near each other, unmistakably dead. My plan had undoubtedly worked. Now, our base looked more like a modern Greek temple, all run down. When I went in, I noticed that the place had been wholly converted into an infirmary of sorts, with the rest of the uninjured people clearing up the debris that was found everywhere. As I sauntered in, they all turned to me. We stared at each other for a solid minute. Then I spoke. "What has happened to all those on the council?" I asked those assembled in the building. They stared at me for another minute before one brave soul spoke out. "They have all been slain. The leaders of all three major groups have been slain. You alone live," she explained. I nodded to show that I heard her. Immediately, cries of "All hail the new leader" rang out across the area, echoes reflecting off the once ornate crumbling white walls. "Please," I said, "just call me by my given name. Duante. I was never one for things like titles, after all. As you wish, Duante." And there it was. No fancy gatherings or transfers of title, but I was the leader, plain and simple. Maintaining the supply chain was not too hard, since I just had to send messengers and go around the portals saying, "Yo guys, I'm the bossman now," to the buyers. The remaining bigwigs in the rival cartels, too, didn't protest. The hubbub I stirred must have gotten them scared. I ended up learning a dirty secret as well, that the transport and sale of Carcara was actually prohibited in theory in many dimensions, which was how the entire cartel system and all the under-the-table discreet smuggling came to be. Cool, yes, alright, that was a bit of a long post, but there's nothing wrong with a little boasting. I'm still alive, though, so congrats to me. I have a great deal of experience with hallucinogenic drugs, from the thousands of hits of LSD that I've taken to the pounds of psilocybin mushrooms that I've eaten. I've stopped time with a combination of nitrous oxide, ketamine and LSD, and had mystical experiences where I heard angels and talked to God on combinations of LSD and mushrooms. Smoked Salvia divinorum hundreds of times and even taken the bizarre mushroom Amanita muscaria, which got me caught in a seemingly eternal time loop that I feel I barely escaped from. But nothing compares to the new hallucinogenic drug sweeping through our town, which people simply called Vortex. The reason for its nickname will become apparent. My first experience seeing someone on Vortex was when I was coming home from work and saw a naked homeless man in the middle of the street. I work the night shift in a rural area and often don't leave till 3 or 4 in the morning, so needless to say, this caught me by surprise. There is almost never anyone out on these streets at night. I almost hit him with my car. Also, it was the middle of winter and freezing out. A combination of sleet and snow rained down from the sky, covering the naked man in a layer of icy condensation. But despite all this, he didn't seem cold at all. In fact, he was visibly sweating and sending off clouds of steam. His jaw moved rhythmically as if he were chewing on an imaginary wad of gum. As I got out, I saw his eyes staring through me, his pupils dilated so much they covered the entire iris in blackness. At first, I said nothing, just staring back at him blankly. Only the sound of sleet and ice hitting my car and the road broke the silence. "Sir, are you okay?" I asked. He ignored my question, instead pointing directly behind me. "Do you see them?" he asked in a low, quavering voice. I hesitated to turn around and leave myself open to potential attack from this potentially psychotic individual, but his clear anxiety and fear rapidly changed my mind. On the side of the road, directly behind me, stood what appeared to be a doorway connected to nothing. Iridescent colors formed a kaleidoscopic tunnel that zoomed endlessly into the center, fractals connecting and dissipating every moment as I stared into this spiraling vortex. I could almost see through it, as if the doorway had the substantiality of a rainbow, but the beings stepping out of the other side of it looked entirely real and solid. They had long antlers branching out from the top of their head, skull-like faces shaped like a deer's with pieces of rotted skin and fur still attached haphazardly to their bones. Their ribs glistened under the snow and sleet, their claw-like talons extending far below their knees. Their skin, what remained of it, clung to their bones, reminding me of a survivor from a World War II death camp. The smell of rancid meat and rotting flesh rose from their bodies in clouds as they tramped towards us, towering at least 10 feet tall. I didn't know what kind of nightmare these monsters had been ripped out of, but now that they were fully in our world, they seemed to smile, the bones of their faces twisting and rancid flesh ripping as they grinned down at me. I knew, at that moment, that I was dead. Even though I stood only 5 feet from the car, they were nearly as close and had much longer strides, as well as freakishly long arms that could reach out and pluck me up in an instant. At that moment, the naked man screamed out, the Manaha, in a panicked voice, and tried to run past the 3 of them. They all turned to look at him in the same instant, their unnaturally long arms reaching out and picking him up off the ground as if he weighed as much as a feather. They started laughing, a high-pitched psychotic laughter that echoed and reverberated throughout the surrounding woods, a sound so loud and all-consuming that I felt it vibrating through my heart and my rib cage. But my instinct kicked in and I knew I had only a slim opportunity to escape. I took it, running into my still open driver's side door and slamming it shut behind me as fast as I could. My car was still running, sending out clouds of exhaust behind me. I slammed the gear selector into drive. As I sent one last glance out in the direction of the homeless man, I saw them rending him limb from limb while he shrieked in agony. One of them pulled his arm off, separating it at the shoulder and lifting the severed arm over its mouth, letting the blood from the veins and arteries pour into its skeletal mouth. The man was still alive as they ripped off his skin and sent their long, forked tongues into his open eyes and screaming mouth. That was all I needed to see. I pounded my foot onto the accelerator and took off, the engine of the Ford Taurus revving loudly as the four-wheel drive cut through the slush and half-melted snow on the road. I heard a sharp scraping sound on the back of the car, likely one of the creature's claws, but I didn't look back to check. One of them had bounded over and tried to open the driver's side door, running with the car as it accelerated, but luckily for me, my car automatically locked the doors once you began driving. The monster let go and smashed in the back window with its massive bony fist, but then I lost them in a matter of seconds as I sped away. What the fuck, what the fuck, what the fuck, I said to myself, a vulgar mantra that nonetheless made me feel more grounded. My mind cleared as the adrenaline rush began to wane, leaving me feeling used up and exhausted. I went around a sharp turn and, to my great relief, couldn't even see the creatures in the rearview mirror any longer. Taking a deep breath, I centered myself, reaching into my pocket for my phone and dialing 911. 911, what's your current location, please? A young female operator said on the other end of the line. Between trembling breaths, I told her, Clearview Lane, at the town line of Unity in Fredericksburg, I said quickly, my voice trembling. There is a man, dead, on the side of the road. I think he was attacked by, what did I say exactly? Certainly not the truth. No one would believe me unless they saw it for themselves. Grizzly bears, I finished quietly. My service began to cut out then, and I could only make out every other word she said. Help. I heard her say before the call dropped completely. The service was always spotty out here on these rural mountain roads. I drove down a steep mountain pass towards the main valley where downtown lay. On the way, a scenic overlook had picnic tables. All the trees that obstructed the view were cut down. Looking over, I had a sudden view of the downtown area of Fredericksburg, and I saw fires rising up from the buildings in a towering inferno. I could smell the smoke through my car vents even up here, a smell like charred wood, burning metal and thick smoke. The trees then blocked the view of the town again, but within a couple minutes I was driving into the center of it. This was, after all, the only road that led to the house I rented on the far edge of Fredericksburg. Flashing lights from emergency vehicles reflected blinding pulses of red and blue throughout the dark mountainous forests. Something landed heavily on top of my car, and a massive clawed hand reached down and smashed my windshield. I started swerving wildly, barely missing a tree on the edge of the road. A dirt driveway was approaching on the left, and I turned sharply, sending the beast on top of my car flying off. It looked like some kind of hybrid between a gargoyle and a Komodo dragon. It had green skin that glowed in the dark, illuminating the nearby trees in deep iridescent hues. Its wings absolutely dwarfed the center mass of the being, spreading out in each direction 20 feet. It flapped them languidly, landing softly on the dirt driveway and staring at me with a look of abject fury. It opened its huge mouth and sent out a shriek that sounded like a woman being burned at the stake. Loud, piercing, and seemingly never-ending. My car's headlights were facing it head-on now, and I slammed the accelerator down. The beast jumped up, but not fast enough. My tires pinned its left wing down, as it furiously beat them, trying to rise in the air. Unable to escape, it fell beneath the tires of my car, a sickening crack resonating throughout the valley as I ran over its spine and chest. I heard rending sounds as its claws and mouth tore at the underside of my carriage and the tires. The car quickly stopped working as I drove it forward another few feet, the tires rapidly losing all pressure as steam began to pour out of the engine. My heart was beating fast and I felt on the verge of a breakdown. More shrieks from across the valley answered the dying cry of the beast as it let out one final defeated scream, then fell silent. I turned the car off, and all I could hear was the ticking of the engine block and the soft patter of sleet against the top of the car. Then I heard something else, something that made my heart soar with hope. The sound of a human voice. "Hey, you in the Taurus," someone said nearby. I looked down the dirt driveway and saw a person waving their arms furiously in front of a one-story blue and white house. I opened the car door, looking down at the flying lizard suspiciously. I had heard many stories of rabid animals who people thought were dead before they picked them up and the animal came back to life and bit them. Or some species of animals would even play dead as a defense mechanism against predators. I carefully tapped the edge of the wing with with my steel toe shoes, then stomped on it as hard as I could. The creature did not stir, which I took as a signal that it was truly dead. I jumped out of the car and began to jog towards the house. I did not want to stay out in the open for longer than I had to. As I neared the front porch, I realized the person who had called me was actually an old man who looked like he was in his 80s or 90s. Tiny wisps of hair grew out of his hawk-like nose and large ears, and his face was a labyrinth of wrinkles and creases. He smiled at me, revealing 2 full sets of steel dentures that shined under the dim porch lights. I towered over him, and he was hunched over, which further diminished his height. On his head, he wore a fishing cap made of khaki. It looked large on him and jostled slightly as he moved. A large black pin with white font stuck to the front of the fishing cap read, "Hope in reality is the worst of all evils because it prolongs the torments of man. Don't dilly-dally," he said gruffly, looking me up and down. "You know as well as I do what lurks out here. Get inside, get inside." He made hand gestures like he was swatting at me, and I went through the door into the house. He slammed it shut behind us, engaging a deadbolt and locking the doorknob. The house smelled of vanilla candles, fresh baked bread, and behind that, a musty and dusty odor that older homes seemed to get. It had knickknacks on every shelf in the hall to the foyer. The man pushed by me, leading me to a living room lined with bookshelves, thousands of leather-clad hardcover books lining the walls on every side. I noticed he had no TV in here. He motioned for me to sit down on the couch and sat next to me on the recliner. Then he started talking. "My name is Canton," he said slowly, making eye contact with me the whole time. "And yours?" "I'm Ryan," I said. "Ryan Kellerman." He nodded gravely at this, which almost made me burst out laughing, as it seemed so weird to the piddling details we had just revealed. But I contained my mirth inside myself. Perhaps the shock of the day was just finally getting to me. "Look, Ryan," he said, "we have a situation." His steel teeth shined even brighter in the fluorescent lights as he talked. "Yes," I said, "I saw a man get murdered by something earlier, and there seem to be more of those somethings all over the place. It's the drug," Canton said abruptly. "This Vortex crap. I don't know who discovered it, but someone thought it would be fun to use our town as the guinea pigs and mix it in with the illegal drug supply here. This may surprise you, but I am ex-FBI. I also spent decades working with black ops in the US government. The governor has called in an agency that most people don't even realize exists. They usually call themselves the Psychic Research Agency, or the PRA. While the name might not sound intimidating, they are ruthless killers, torturers, and psychopaths of the highest degree. Through my lifelong connections, I was warned that the federal government had surrounded this town, quarantining us from the rest of the country, and they will soon be sending in their goons to execute every single last one of us and all the creatures as well. No one can be left alive who saw the powers of Vortex or what it can bring to our world. "So we're all dead, huh?" I asked, feeling dissociated and oddly calm under the circumstances. Outside the house I could hear sirens, people screaming in the distance, and other sounds that were not human. "Not exactly," he said, a small smirk crossing his old, weathered face. "I put millions of doses of Vortex in the water supply for the town," I gasped, rising from my chair. You're the reason everything is going to hell outside," I screamed. He motioned for me to sit down, calmly waiting for me to stop yelling. It just made me angrier. No, the drug was already here in isolated cases, and the government had already made the call to kill us all when I acted. I found the source and did what I had to do. You have to understand, the agents were already on their way, and the death warrants for every man, woman, and child in the town were signed by the president himself. But if everyone is exposed to the drug, then it will open countless portals to other parts of the multiverse, let in many other beings who can fight those federal agents. Those beings are our only chance. They can kill the executioners that have already surrounded the town and allow at least some of us to escape. I sighed, sitting back down. "If I even believe what you've said," I began, "and I'm not sure I do. How do you propose that we get out of this town? We can't exactly just walk through the woods with countless monsters infesting the entire area." His face fell, his expression turning to a frown. "Honestly, I haven't gotten that far yet in my planning. I did the only thing possible, at least in my mind, but we just have to try to escape in the chaos and take as many innocent people with us as possible. The monsters will begin attacking the lines of agents surrounding the town soon if they haven't already, and that will open up weak points where we can break through. I have plenty of guns here and a working car." And he reached underneath his recliner, pulling out a plastic bag. "I have millions more doses of Vortex." He shook the bag, and I saw purple crystals inside sending off sparks of iridescent light as he did so. "This drug is active in doses of millionths of a gram and begins to work within seconds. It has 100% bioavailability even when absorbed through the skin. We may be able to figure out a way to drug the agents with it if everything else fails." At that moment, we begin to hear gunshots directly outside of the house. A bullhorn was turned on, emitting a loud mechanical shriek for a moment before a voice began to speak. "You are surrounded," a deep voice said. "Come out with your hands raised and we will not harm you. You are under quarantine. I repeat, your house is surrounded. Come out now and surrender." "Oh God," Canton said, putting his face in his hands. "It's too late." But then he looked up, his expression brightening. Unless what?" I asked, feeling sweaty and trapped in the house. I knew we didn't have much time before they broke down the door, and if what he said was true, they would just fill us up with bullets on the spot. "Our only chance," Canton said, "is the drug. We have to both take it and open the doorway, let something in that might be able to fight, and kill those agents outside. We certainly can't take them with my guns, just two of us and no body armor. My rifles aren't even fully automatic and theirs are. It really is our only hope." I sighed deeply, a rising sense of trepidation increasing my anxiety. I did not want to take this drug, didn't even want to be near it. I had seen the kind of horrors it could unleash. "All right," I said, before I could let my fear stop me. "Let's do this now, before I lose my courage." He nodded, getting up and rummaging through a nearby desk, pulling out 2 bright blue pills. He gave one to me and kept one for himself. "Same time," he said. "Just chew it and keep it in your mouth. We don't have time to wait for the capsule lining to dissolve." "Ready?" I nodded, and we both popped the capsule in our mouth, chewing them as fast as we could. I could hear the agents moving around outside, getting closer. It sounded like there were dozens of people out there. "Last chance," said the man with the bullhorn. "Come out with..." And then his voice deepened and slowed, and I couldn't understand it anymore. It sounded like the calls of a blue whale in the ocean, but even deeper than that. Time slowed to a crawl. I looked out the window and saw a water droplet falling. It fell at a snail's pace, seeming to hang suspended in the air by some magical force. My heart tightened in my chest, and I felt overwhelming waves of fear. I remembered all the worst parts of my life. Finding my brother's dead body after a heroin overdose, seeing my mother dying of cancer, having to bury my cat's mangled body after she was attacked by a neighbor's dog and had her throat ripped out. It was like it was all there in front of me every time I blinked, another image of terror and sadness, like the drug was trying to break me. I closed my eyes and breathed deep, trying to calm myself, using techniques for Buddhist meditation I had learned. I recited a mantra and began to focus on my breathing, imagining pure white light spreading from my heart to the rest of my body. While it didn't fully break the terror, it did help a great deal. When I opened them again, I saw Cantor also had an expression of fear on his face, his bright blue eyes looking frantically around the room as rainbows began to shimmer behind him. 2 doorways materialized at the same time, both standing nearly as tall as the room itself. I stared into the kaleidoscopic tunnel in the center as I heard the front door crashing in, the sound of heavy boots entering the house. We had almost run out of time. From one of the portals stepped monsters from some alien world. They were about the size of German shepherds and even walked on all fours, but there the resemblance to canines ended. Their skin looked like burning lava, and their eyes were just empty sockets with flames dancing within the empty orbs. Their mouths hung open, revealing hundreds of sharpened obsidian teeth, the size of needles on the top and bottom. There were 4 of them, and they seemed to travel as a pack. They regarded us with rage, looking like they were about to spring and rip both of our throats out. Luckily at that moment, an agent ran in with his gun raised at us, his finger on the trigger, and the creatures immediately turned and pounced on him instead. He screamed as their paws burned through his SWAT gear and into his flesh, a smell like roasting pork mixed with burning cloth filling the living room. I took the chance to grab Canton's hand and try to pull him away from the direction of the front door. "We have to go now," I shouted at him, and then I saw what was coming through the other portal. It reminded me of the Hindu god Shiva. It looked like a human being with blue skin who stood 10 feet tall, had 4 arms and a loincloth of some alien leather material covering his waist. In his top right arm he held a silver trident, the other arms all holding daggers or swords. His eyes looked like pure white lights emanating from his face as he stared directly at me, and I knew without question that I had been the one who summoned this being. Dozens more federal agents rushed into the room, their guns raised, but they weren't even looking at us anymore. They all began shooting in unison at the alien dogs and the four-armed being. The dogs leapt at the agents, their molten skin melting the agents' guns and bodies as they ripped out the agents' throats with their obsidian teeth. Spurts of blood began to soak the hardwood floors as men began to scream and die all around us. The smell of copper and iron began to drift through the entire area as droplets of blood flew in all directions. "Let's go," I said to Canton, grabbing his arm and heading towards the kitchen. There was no door in there, but I opened a large window, shoving the old man through before jumping out myself. Shrieks of pain and more gunshots followed us out into the night. I used my cell phone as a light as we traversed across the forest. There were hints of a perimeter being formed, but the dead bodies of men and women in black SWAT gear all around us showed it had not held against the many monsters released in the town of Fredericksburg this night. Some of the agents out here on the edge of town had been beheaded, others were skinned alive. A few were crucified on lamp posts, most of their clothes ripped off and deep gashes covering their entire bodies. I saw men whose penises had been cut off and stuffed into their mouths, women whose eyes had been ripped out and replaced with coins, and much worse things that I try not to remember. Eventually we made it into a nearby town, grabbing food from a diner as I wrote all this down. I thought it was over. I hoped it was over. I didn't want to think of this night ever again. However, someone just sent me a picture on my cell phone. It looks like a blue-skinned, four-armed god dancing on the bodies of dozens of black-clad men in SWAT gear. Thank you to my superfans, Sweet Black Swan, Tacey, and Brooklyn. I really appreciate you guys supporting my channel, and I look forward to making more content for everyone.